13th.
Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2009 reboot of Friday the 13th. Now, this is honestly one of the better reboots of a well-established horror franchise. And it's one of those films that is a little underrated because I don't see it really talked about as much when it comes to this franchise. And on one hand, I can get it because in a lot of ways, it's just a mismatch of different plot elements from the first four films that are just thrown in a blender. But on the other hand, it's a well-made, well-put-together film that is clearly written and directed by people who are fans of this franchise. And to me, that goes a long way. And I also feel that there were some tweaks that were made here that made it feel fresh. It didn't feel like it was just a tired, stale retread. So the film was directed by Marcus Nispel, who prior to this had directed a film that you might know of, the remake of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So he was brought on board to do another take, another reimagining of a popular horror franchise with Friday the 13th. And I think his direction is really good. I thought that he did a great job providing a lot of grit, a lot of really nice mood and atmosphere. And I felt that he directed a lot of the sequences that took place in claustrophobic areas, like in the tunnels and in other parts of the cabin or the house, in a way that was really impressive, that really enhanced the foreboding and the really genuinely terrifying nature of these sequences of being trapped with Jason Voorhees. And I thought the film had a nice amount of energy to it in terms of the placement of shots. I felt that a lot of the scenes with Jason, when he's running around and he's just a mad, crazed dog, were really effective and definitely ratcheted up the suspense. And sequences that were just trying to be a little more lighthearted or throwback to some of the other scenes and other films in this franchise were also well shot. And overall, I thought Nispel did a really great job directing this film. And I feel that he deserves a lot of credit for that. Also, when it comes to getting the most out of the location of Jason's cabin or the woods or the other locations in and around Camp Crystal Lake. And he really did provide his own style to it. It didn't really feel like it was an imitation of Sean S. Cunningham or an imitation of Steve Miner or an imitation of another director who lent their talents to this franchise. So I thought Marcus Nispel was a really good choice because he had reimagined Texas Chainsaw Massacre and from a directorial standpoint did a good job with that. And I felt that he was definitely one of those guys who could pull it off, and I feel that he did. I felt he pulled it off brilliantly. And from a screenwriting perspective, the script by Damian Shannon and Mark Swift, who worked on Freddy vs. Jason, is a really solid, strong script. The characters, for the most part, I thought that they were fairly likable and enjoyable. The main cast has some characters that are a little cannon fodder for me, but the rest I can deal with. The opening cast in the beginning for the first 25 minutes uh, was also really strong in terms of how they were written, especially the dialogue. Some really funny banter with these characters, and you really did buy that they were friends and they had a connection. And I felt the bits with Clay Miller was really inspired. It was taking elements of the character in part four who had a connection with Jason in terms of Jason killed his, I think he killed his sister or something along those lines, and he wants revenge. Well, here it's Clay is looking for his sister who was kidnapped by Jason, and I really felt that the two writers nailed it when it comes to this character, making him a really captivating and a great lead in a lot of ways. Because when you get to this portion of the film, after the first 25 minutes, which is, in all honesty, a mini slasher movie, that's really what the first 25 minutes is Jason stalking and killing a bunch of teens who are trespassing on his camp. And that's what the first 25 minutes are, and they're not really intended to be the main characters other than Whitney. So after that, it's then focusing on Clay and his search for Whitney, as well as a new uh, batch of would-be body bags. Now, some aspects of the script are not as strong in this half. Uh, some things are a little muddled in terms of why Jason would kidnap this girl and keep her alive. I know I've heard that it's because she reminds him of his mother when she was young, but it's a little clunky and just it doesn't really work that well. And then you have the ending of the film, which is definitely trying to be a homage to the other endings in the series, where it's a jump scare or it's a dream and Jason's not dead. But the way that it's structured and the way that it's written is very forced, and it doesn't feel like it's earned, and it feels really lazy compared to the rest of the film. I also want to give the writers a lot of credit for a good amount of the kills. There was a lot of brutality to them, especially the kill in the beginning when I think it was Amanda, maybe I could be wrong. It might be another character when she gets put into a sleeping bag and roasted over a fire. That was pretty brutal. And there's a lot of other sequences where Jason is definitely using his physicality. When he shoves the machete through the top of the girl's head while she's hiding under the bridge, um, throws the axe and it goes through the guy's chest. And I felt that for the most part, the kills were pretty well done. Kills this other guy with an arrow, um, and it's one of those things where it wasn't as creative in terms of the kills as other films in the series. So I would say that that's another aspect of the script that's a little bit lacking, is that the kills weren't really that creative. They kind of ran together, or they were really not that special. Like one guy just gets I think it's a knife or a screwdriver or something like that, just slowly shoved into his neck. Really wasn't much of anything. But that being said, I felt that the way that they were written, the way that they were shot, still had a certain brutality to them, which felt like it was missing in some of the other films in the series because of the censors and also because of a different approach in terms of how they handled these sequences. This is definitely less of a over-the-top comic book kind of style slasher and more of a return to the format of the first Friday the 13th or part 2 or the final chapter. And there were other aspects of the script that I liked, like how Jason got his mask. Yes, it's simple, but I thought it was effective. I actually liked that sequence a fair bit. I thought it was pretty tense, and it was a well written scene. It was a well shot scene, and I thought it was honestly pretty epic when he grabs the mask and puts it on, and you have that moment where Jason realizes that it's a good fit. You didn't really have that moment in part three when he got the mask. He just got the mask, and that was really it. It didn't really seem like there was that revelation, like that light bulb moment for Jason where he's like, I like this. This looks cool. So I like that part of the film as well. And it had some twists that I didn't expect. For instance, I felt that the fact that Jason kept Whitney alive as a prisoner was completely different. Not something that I'd ever seen uh, Jason do before. So that was something that was out of left field that I didn't expect. And then on top of that, you also had a twist with this other character who you think that she's going to be one of the final girls, and Jenna, who has been a real help to Clay this whole time, and she gets killed. I did not expect that to happen at all. That really took me for a loop. So I don't agree with the criticisms that this screenplay has nothing new. It brings nothing new to the franchise because you have elements like that. Jason holding someone captive, uh, twists with one of the main characters getting killed by Jason instead of surviving, and also Jason himself and how his character is written here. He's smarter. He's more methodical. He uses traps. And that was initially something that I wasn't a fan of when I first saw this, because I was like, this isn't Jason. What is this shit? But then I really started to appreciate it the more I saw this film. And now I love it. I love the fact that Jason in this film, who is brilliantly portrayed by Derek Mears, I thought he did an amazing job playing Jason Voorhees in this. The approach that the writers have with Jason here is that he's not a complete and total moron. He's not a mindless killing machine. He can actually uh, think for himself. He can use traps. He can use locations to bring people to him. He can use a series of tunnels to traverse around and to more quickly get to his victims. It's something that I think a lot of Friday the 13th fans are not a fan of because it's so different and it's not what they're used to when it comes to Jason. But that's why I love it. This is what you should be doing with a new Friday the 13th, is providing a new approach for this character instead of giving the audience the exact same cookie cutter approach that all the other films have done prior. That works for only so long. So if you're going to try to reinvent a character, or if you're going to try to bring a franchise like Friday the 13th into what was at the time a new generation, you need to have a new and different approach in some way, shape, or form. Not completely new to the point where it's completely alien to the audience. It's very core to the success of the franchise. I want to make that clear. There are a lot of instances where these reboots stray way too far away from the soul or the spirit of the character, like A Nightmare on Elm Street, for instance. Which apparently I read somewhere that Samuel Bayer, he was actually approached to maybe direct this, and he turned it down. I'm glad, because Samuel Bayer sucks ass. He did a horrendous job directing the Nightmare on Elm Street remake. He would have been the worst possible guy for the job, and this film would have been an absolute dumpster fire if he was the one that was directing it, because he has absolutely zero genuine passion for this franchise or any of these franchises. He didn't have any passion for A Nightmare on Elm Street, and it showed. And he clearly, I 100% guarantee that he did not have much passion for this franchise either. And he was just a talentless hack, period. I mean, Marcus Nispel at least showed that he had talent, despite the issues with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake. Sorry about that tangent, but I just remember reading that and I was like, thank God. Thank God Samuel Barras didn't direct this movie. Um, but yeah, I like the approach. I like the fact that Jason is smarter and more methodical and takes his time and uses his smarts. It's different. Uh, it, it's something that helps the film stand out in a good way. I also appreciate that we didn't bring back Harry Manfredini to do another score. I think at this point he had done enough, so they brought in a different composer in Steve Jablonsky. It was really refreshing to hear a different composer's take on this character of Jason Voorhees and the mythology and everything. And he paid a lot of respect to Harry as well, because there were moments where it used the kikiki ma ma ma, which he likes to call, but really I like to call it ch 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 ah ah ah, because nobody fucking calls it kikiki ma 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 other than Harry Manfredini. At least nobody that I know, because it doesn't sound like that at all. It didn't sound like that here either. Um, so there were moments of Harry's score that was incorporated here, but in a way that didn't feel like it was just copying his work. At the same time, though, this is not a great score. I'm not going to say this is an incredibly memorable score, and I think Harry has done better scores in other films in this series. But it was still a score that was effective for what the film was trying to do, for what the filmmakers wanted from the music, to be more in the background and really have the visuals carry the mood or the atmosphere more than the score. And the cast, for the most part, I thought they all did a good job. Jared Padalecki, I thought was fantastic. I thought he did a really nice job as Clay Miller. I liked that character. I thought his performance was nuanced and definitely a guy that you rooted for and wanted him to find his sister and make it out alive. Danielle Panabaker, she was there as Jenna. I've seen worse, but I've seen better. I felt that Amanda Righetti as Whitney was definitely a stronger actress and delivered a stronger performance. Travis Van Winkle was an absolute douchebag, but that's the point. Like, the guy played a great douchebag. Like, I hated Trent. Even the name, like, most of the time when when a guy's named Trent in a movie like this, he's an asshole. And he really did play that role so well. And he had one of the best deaths too, when Jason stabs him with a machete and then throws his ass on the back of a truck. Uh, and it was well worth the wait, because you were just waiting for this guy to fucking get his, because he's a selfish fucking douchebag. Aaron Yu is Chewie. It was there for me. He had fun with it. You could tell that he was having fun with it. Maybe I would have been more into this character if his death was more memorable. Maybe that's part of it. Because a lot of these characters in these films, it's not really the character development that you're looking for. It's personality, charisma, and then on top of that, a memorable death. And his death was just really lame. And I know there's a more violent version in the killer cut, but it doesn't make the death better. It just makes it gorier. It's still a lame death. It's just Jason slowly stabbing the guy in the neck. Derek Mears, absolutely awesome as Jason Voorhees, an awesome presence. Just really handled the physical stuff so well. He had a really uh, great time playing this character, and you can see why in every sequence that he's in. In a lot of ways, it's almost like he's having. You can tell that in moments of glee or bliss when he's got the hockey mask on and he's playing Jason Voorhees. And from what I've heard, Derek Mears is a great guy, a really nice person to meet and to talk to at conventions. And I do have his autograph. I believe I think it was either yeah, it was a part of a horror subscription box. Derek Mears, I think he deserves tons of accolades, and it's a shame that he didn't get to play Jason again in a sequel. It's a shame we didn't get another one with Jason in the snow, killing teenagers, and in the winter, which would have been a really refreshing setting, because you had never seen that before with this franchise, and you really hadn't seen it that much, period, with a slasher. So it would have been nice to have seen a big budget studio slasher film with a lot of money behind it, a lot of clout, a lot of people who are willing to come to bat for it, taking place in the snow. And didn't happen because for some reason New Line didn't want to do a sequel to this, even though it made a decent amount of money in the box office. But that's a whole other story. But going back to the cast, the rest of the cast hold their own well too. Jonathan Sadowski is Wade, Julianna Guill is Bree, Ben Feldman is Richie. You got Arlen Escarpeta as Lawrence, Ryan Hansen as Nolan, Willa Ford as Chelsea, Nick Mennell as Mike, uh, America Olivo as Amanda, Kyle Davis as Donnie. You had Richard Burgi, who played Sheriff Brack, and I bet that his last name is a tribute to Peter Brack, who wrote Crystal Lake Memories. That's a really awesome thing for the screenwriters to do, to throw in a tribute to a author who is a huge fan of the series. You had Nana Visitor, who played young. She played Pamela Voorhees in the opening sequence, which I guess that I will say this. The opening sequence, which is a flashback to when Jason was young and saw his mom get killed, is honestly pretty bad. It's shot in a way that is just off. It's just very off kilter and just awkward from the perspective from the way it's shot with the black and white and all of this. And then Nana Visitor is atrocious, just really bad, hamming it up as Pamela. And even the opening credits are very bland and boring. The font is like the most dull font you could ever possibly come up with or use for a Friday the 13th film. And I don't know why they chose that font, but it was just, it honestly, it did not start off well. I'm with a lot of people when they say that it did not start off that promising, because you have this really dull, boring looking font, and then you got this really weak, subpar sequence with Pamela Voorhees, and it was just not really that great. But it got a hell of a lot better after that point. And yeah, overall, pretty good cast. They had good chemistry in both sections of the film, the first 25 minutes with the cast, and then the rest of the film as well. And I felt it went by at a good pace. 97 minutes. It didn't really feel like it was too long, although there were some moments where it did kind of slow down a little bit. The pacing did suffer. Mostly it's those scenes where they tried to form a romantic relationship between Clay and Jenna. Those scenes just kind of dragged for me because I didn't really buy the chemistry between the two, and I didn't buy them as a couple, and it just felt like they were wasting my time. So there were some scenes like that where it was a little too slow. And then the other stuff with Donnie, this redneck guy, ultimately he's one of the reasons why Jason got his mask, but it's just one of those things where I don't know, it just felt like a lot of those scenes were just out of place in terms of the tone, and I don't, I just nah. And even the way he died was kind of lame. He just got his throat slit. So, I mean, it was about as out of place as Jason having a marijuana farm, Which I gotta be honest, that was a little like, huh? Why would he do that? Why? I guess it's another way to show his intelligence, to trick people, to lure them in, and in that regard, okay, it makes sense, but it's definitely something that you don't think of when you think of Jason Voorhees. Using marijuana plants as a trap for horny teenagers who want to go to the woods and have sex and also get high. Um, but yeah, Donnie, the redneck guys, and thankfully though they didn't use the alternate sequence where Jason gets his mask from him directly. Because in the version that's used in the theatrical cut and the killer cut, Jason gets his mask in the attic. He just finds it sitting there in a box. But in another version of the film, another version of that sequence, Donnie uses the hockey mask as a wank mask. Yeah, he puts on the hockey mask and then jerks his dick while he's reading porno mags, and I'm just like, oh god, thank Christ that was not the actual version they used. Even though it has a good kill, it has a better kill. I wish they combined the two. I wish you had the decapitation of Donnie that was in the wank mask sequence in the version that they ultimately used instead of his throat getting slit. But I'm glad that they didn't use that version with the decapitation, as good as the decapitation is, because that fucking idea is idiotic. The idea that Jason's mask is some redneck dumbass's wank mask. Like, that's just wrong on so many levels. And there are other alternate cuts, alternate stuff with this film. There's an alternate version of the ending where Jason gets attacked and cornered by Clay and Whitney. There's one version where it ends way too quickly. Jason barely puts up a fight. He just gets the chain wrapped around his neck, gets thrown into the thresher or whatever, and then just dies or gets stopped right then and there. And I'm glad they didn't go with that, because that the film would have really suffered if that was the case. Because after all of this, after showing that Jason is a legitimate threat, a force to be reckoned with once again, someone who's not only relentless but is also intelligent, smart in his own way, to have him just get defeated that quickly would have been an absolute mistake. But thankfully, they reshot some scenes, did things differently, and you have the version that they used in the final cut, where Jason puts up one hell of a fight. He doesn't go down without swinging. Like, they think they got him, but he gets out and smacks the shit out of Clay with the 2x4, and it takes a lot more to bring him down. So that is definitely the better approach than the blink and you miss it original uh, alternate cut that I think they ultimately shot, and then maybe they showed it to test audiences and they were like, this is not going to work. So then they went back and did some reshoots, or it was just one of those things where it was an alternate cut that they thought about doing, but then they looked at the dailies and were like, yeah, this sucks. There's no way that this is going to work. So then they reshot it with Jason uh, wrecking some shit before he eventually goes down for the count, at least for this time. And from a technical standpoint, the film was also quite impressive, from the cinematography, by Daniel C. Pearl, and the editing by Ken Blackwell. I thought it was a really well edited film, and I also felt that when you had the practical effects, when they were there, they were effective. But there was a lot of CGI actually, and it was shot in a way that covered it up well and made it so you could barely even notice. And also the CGI was done so well that it was effective. There was a scene where one of the characters gets killed with an arrow to the head, and that was apparently CGI. And that's a really great looking shot. I thought it was practical, but apparently it wasn't. So that's one of the most impressive bits of practical, I mean, non-practical gore that I can think of that I've seen. Like that was a really effective shot. It looked like it was done practically. There was other stuff like when Jason throws the axe at one of the guys, in order to get the axe to fly the way that the director wanted it to on camera, they had to do that digitally. So that also worked quite well and was seamless in a lot of different ways. So yeah, for a visual effects standpoint, the film works. Practical effects, when they are there, you definitely have a good amount of blood and gore. If you're looking for nudity, you get a shit ton of that. You definitely get what you pay for or what you were asking for when it comes to the nudity with this film. Apparently, according to IMDb, Michael Bay walked out of the film because it had too much nudity. That, if that's true, that's crazy. Like I do not think of Michael Bay as the guy who's like, "Oh, that's too much tits for me. I can't take it." It's like Michael Bay can have all the explosions and all the other shots of TNA and these other films that he's directed, but he can't handle like multiple shots of breasts and uh, other bits of female nudity. It's like that seems like a stretch. I don't know about that one, but it would be honestly fun to know the truth behind that. Like, did that actually happen? Like, is he really was he really that offended or triggered by all the tits in this film that he walked out? But yeah, and then other thing to mention too, of course, the costume design for Jason. I thought that was also really effective, and I thought they did a great job. The costume designer and designing the look of Jason's mask and making it look like it's worn and definitely been through a lot prior to Jason putting it on, and the makeup effects of unmasked Jason and even having a throwback to part two where you have Jason wearing the bag on his head prior to him getting the hockey mask like he did in part three, and other shots in the film that are direct homages to other films in the series. I really love the shot of Jason breaking through the window and grabbing Clay. That is 100% inspired by the shot in part two when Jason breaks through the window and grabs Ginny Steele's character. I mean, uh, Amy Steele's character, Ginny. I'm sorry, I keep I keep thinking that she is Ginny because that's one of the biggest roles for her. So in my head, I get the things mixed up sometimes. But yeah, Amy Steele's character Ginny, because there's that shot where Jason breaks through the window and grabs her, and in this film there is a shot that is almost shot for shot a copy of that, but with the roles reversed. With well, not really the roles reversed, but with uh, instead of the final girl, the final guy being the one that's being grabbed by Jason. So there's a lot of stuff like that in this that are clear homages to the other films in the series and are definitely meant as Easter eggs to the fans. And I felt that the way that they were handled were ways that were not really heavy-handed or obvious, and or structured in ways where they felt like they were forced in there, or this was more natural. The Easter eggs felt like they were more earned, and there weren't so many of them like in the 2018 Halloween reboot or sequel, for instance, where it felt like it was just fan service. So there were moments in this where it was giving you a little bit of a wink, but it wasn't in a way where it was like, hey, remember this, remember this, remember this, remember that scene, remember this line, remember this. It wasn't like that. And I really appreciate that it didn't go that route with Friday the 13th. But yeah, overall, I like the film. I think it's a entertaining movie that has some nice direction, some decent acting, and a great Jason and Derek Mears. And overall, I think that it did what it set out to do, create another uh, jumping off point for another series of Friday the 13th films. And sadly, it just didn't happen due to the studio being reluctant on doing a sequel, and then now because of what's going on with the rights issues with Victor Miller and Shaunus Cunningham and that whole clusterfuck. So if this does wind up being the last Friday the 13th film in the franchise, it's not a bad way to go out because it stands on its own, even though a lot of it is just the first four films crammed together. It still brings in some new things. It adds a fresh take on the character of Jason Voorhees in terms of how he handles himself. That it feels like it isn't just stale leftovers. So if this is the last one, I'm okay with that because it was enjoyable, it was entertaining, and it also provided a new perspective on the franchise and on its slasher icon and Jason Voorhees. But anyway, thanks for watching my review of Friday the 13th, the 2009 reboot, and thanks for watching all the Friday the 13th reviews. If you have been binging them, or if you've been just joining in, or even if this is just the first or an only review of this franchise that you've seen, thanks for checking it out. And as always, I'll see you all later. See ya.